My name is Daniel Croson. I'm the Chief of Staff here at Newark Opportunity Youth Network, joined here by many of my colleagues in the audience here today, including our founder and Chief Executive Officer, Robert Clark, which is a name many of you probably know from years within Aspen. But before we begin, just to orient us all to the two panelists we have here with us today, I'm just going to provide their backgrounds just so we all know kind of how we got to where we are. We're joined here today by Senator Teresa Ruiz. In 2007, Senator Ruiz made history as the first Puerto Rican elected to the Senate and has since been reelected 5 times. Currently serving as Senate Majority Leader, she is the highest-ranking Latina legislator in state history and previously chaired the Senate Education Committee. Throughout her tenure, she has championed equity in education, leading efforts to expand access to early childhood education statewide, eliminate the reduced category and federal free and reduced meal program, and ensure all eligible students receive breakfast and lunch at no cost. She was also the prime sponsor of the Disconnection Prevention and Recovery Bill, which was signed into law last year and creates a position of Disconnection Prevention and Recovery Ombudsman within the Department of Education. We're also joined by Assemblyman Al Barlas, who began his career in Trenton nearly 2 decades ago as legislative director, for then Assemblyman Declan O'Scanlan, before serving as Chief of Staff to State Senator Kevin O'Toole and State Senator-elect Kristen Corrado. His career in the New Jersey Republican politics began running legislative and county campaigns, and then as the chairman of the Essex County Young Republicans, eventually becoming the chairman of the New Jersey Young Republican Federation. Assemblyman Barlas currently serves as the chairman of the Essex County Republican Committee. In 2020, he was named as a member of the New Jersey Legislative Reapportionment Commission and the chair of the Republican delegation to the commission. Please join me in welcoming our legislators. Thank you both for joining us today. It's greatly appreciated. So to start things off, school disconnection doesn't just change the course of a young person's life. It affects entire families and communities. From where both of you sit, why is this issue so important for New Jersey right now?
For the record, my bio didn't indicate what party I was, but for indication, I'm Democrat.
I'm the Republican.
Because your bio was Republican this and Republican that and Republican this. I was like, hold up here. I don't want that shadow. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I love Al. Welcome to Newark, everybody, by the way. The greatest city in the state, not Al's district, but mine. So, what was the question again? Oh, the impact, right? Absolutely not. Okay, that is the answer. But I am a people person, so whoever's down to protect people and humanity, I'm with them, no matter what party. So why this is keenly important for me, right? You're sitting right in my own backyard, and we recognize, or at least I recognize, the purpose and the reason why I ran for office was because I know that you could do 2 things, is walk to your local bodega, play the mega, become a billionaire within an hour after they call the numbers. The trajectory of your life is entirely different, and your conversations are different. Or you can walk into a classroom setting with a building that's resourced, with a neighborhood that has wraparound services, and become the best New Jersey taxpayer at the end of that career pathway once we get you there. And so chances are making the common sense investment on the latter part, as opposed to giving people money to play the lottery every single day, makes more valued sense. But we know that learners learn differently, right? That not everyone is meant for one specific pathway. And I think that what we're discussing today is the best, all puns intended, opportunity for governments to lean into common sense approaches. When we recognize that students are not feeling connected in their learning environments, and we are keenly aware that this is happening, not solely in the city of Newark, but throughout the state of New Jersey, in rural sections, and probably in suburban pockets of school districts. If children feel disconnected for whatever reason, whether it's trauma in the home, or a first gen and not understanding the system, or not having been able to read by the 3rd grade and now is completely lost in 6th, 7th, 8th, and in high school, that we have to have different pathways for that person to connect to a viable livelihood for success. To me, it's common sense. Make the investments early on, and every single factor wins later on. That individual has the potential to grow their economy for themselves and their family, also lifting up the neighborhoods that statistically, where it's more pronounced in urban areas and in rural areas, but we know that it's problematic throughout the state of New Jersey. And the leverage that does, as opposed to creating an impact on the state budget long term, whether it's through the criminal justice system and or through benefit and wraparound programs, when we know, in fact, that if we make those investments early on and just change things, is government offers a lot of programs, but we're very siloed and we're very bureaucratic, and I don't believe that we have the best systems in place to get the resources to the individual.
Yeah, I mean, so part of this is reframing how we view life. Everybody sort of believes that you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, and then you retire, right? And that's great for a lot of people, but for some people, that's not for them. And sometimes it is disconnection because of circumstances in which they live in, and sometimes it's because college isn't for everybody. And we have this system and this structure in place that's the only benchmark, is that if you don't go to college, you cannot be successful. And I don't necessarily believe that that's true. And so I think what we have to do as elected officials and leaders and people involved in this process is sort of help reframe the thinking of what defines success. Again, it's okay if you don't go to college. It's not for everybody. But that doesn't mean that you have to then spend your life waiting for a handout from somebody else. It means that you can then position yourself to do better for yourself and your family.
I think, if I can just add, because I don't know, we're similar in age, but I'm first gen who went to school, right? But I'm not
going to tell them how similar.
I'm proud to be 51. I was at the cusp of
44.
Okay. There's a lot to uncover there. I'm going to be very nice. I'm going to be very nice. So I think I was still there where I could have potentially maybe had a good livelihood if I decided to do something different, or it was that cornerstone where you could still go into a company and work your way up, right? There were those kind of opportunities. Today, I think the difference is that, yeah, you don't have to go to college, but you have to get prepared in something, right? And so that's the focus, is pivoting. I don't care what it is. It should be a license. It should be a business plan, whatever it is, but there has to be a pathway towards that.
And Senator, you touched on this briefly when you mentioned the budgetary impact of disconnection. And when we talk about opportunity youth, young people who are not in school and not working, it's easy to focus just on the social impact, which is certainly real. But the economic cost to our state is also significant. How do you connect the issue of youth disconnection to New Jersey's overall economic health and growth?
So I kept my numbers out because it's Monday morning and I was not going to remember these figures, but when we looked at everything, the cost of doing nothing is far greater, right, than the cost of investing. The immediate tax burden for opportunity youth in New Jersey has the potential of being $13.9 billion a year, right? And when you look at those numbers, and then we have to beg during the budget process to make investments or to create offices, it's almost, again, like government loses its common sense approach. Right? People know how to, if you have $5 in your house and you are always broke, you know how to stretch that money. Well, some of us in the legislature still have that understanding. And so it's always the argument of, we know that you can't see it. It's almost like, don't you think government wants to see the thing? Right? Instead of looking at the return of an investment in the long-term strategy, it's almost like they want to see the thing. But by the time we're seeing the thing, it's far gone, as opposed to seeing the infant, the mother, and making those wraparound services immediately there, and then creating those cost savings trajectory as we track that individual until they become a New Jersey taxpayer.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you see government as reactionary in everything that we do, right? And Senator Ruiz certainly advocates for it when it comes to the youth involvement with schools and children and wraparound services. But we have to almost look at it from a 3, 5, 7, 10-year perspective of down the road. We always talk about making these investments, right? We're going to make X billions of dollars in investments in whatever. But then next year it's an election year, and then next year tax revenues are down or priorities change, and then so we start to shift. And that quote-unquote investment in the long term that we're making is always just 1 year or 18 months because priorities shift, circumstances change, and there has to be, to me, an understanding and a willingness on all our parts. I mean, it doesn't matter what party you're in, that you have to make those tough decisions and you have to be willing to ride it out. And you have to make those sustained investments year over year if you want to see any significant return on that investment.
And I think partially because going back to, I think something that you would agree, I don't know if you remember this because you were, you probably do, you were staffing. There was one time the first budget year, there were programs that the Department of Labor would fund to nonprofit sectors to get people geared up to go out and then get employed. Worked, except for the fact that at the one point the programs they were funding had no employment opportunities because the technology had completely shifted. And so in that proactive sense, there should be a concept of where all the department heads and or their designees and the main people of commerce and industry, we should be developing a strategic human capital blueprint to ensure that everyone who calls New Jersey home has economic viability. And I think that is clearly capable. And we can do that. It's not creating another department. It's not doing everything. It's fusing everybody together so that we know that the ed commissioner or his designee knows that in this year, because that's why we need the data, right? We see they're in these areas. How can we connect with the Department of Labor? They create a more strategic plan to fund trade programs. We connect it with the nonprofit sector. I mean, there are ways to really do this in a more the way we see nonprofit sectors doing it, but we can elevate that same strategy at the government side.
Absolutely. And to that point, the issue does touch education and workforce development and community well-being. So how can state agencies and local partners better work together so that no young person falls through the cracks?
So I think this goes to what the senator was saying before, is a true long-term strategic plan and vision of what's coming around the corner. We had the one-stop shops where people can go help get services, getting jobs, and do their unemployment stuff. And the programs that they're training people for, it's already moved well past it, right? I mean, when you're walking in there and you're looking for a job and you're still on MS-DOS, that tells you that we're just totally screwed up in how we're doing this, right? And so, yes, administrations change every 4 to 8 years. Cabinet officers change a couple times in between there as well. But there is that whole sub-layer of government that stays put for 30 years. And to me, it's incumbent upon all of us to force those people who are going to outlive and outlast all of us in government to start collaborating with the private sector, with nonprofits, to figure out where this thing is going. Right now, everything is about data centers, right? And AI, and that's great. And we're doing tax credits, and we're trying to shift the grid around to get everybody to have capacity. But okay, what's going to come after that? Right? And so we need to start looking at 5 to 7 years from now when those folks may be looking for their second career. And what are we doing and how are we investing? Or are we just going to sort of, like the tech bubble, we're going to ride out this AI thing until it crashes, and then we're all going to figure out what to do with these data centers?
Thank you. So we see high rates of youth disconnection, not only in places like here in Essex County, but also in rural areas, as Senator, you were alluding to before, such as Cumberland and Cape May. What does that tell us about how widespread this challenge is and how our solutions need to reach every part of the state?
That if families are under-resourced, government has a responsibility to create an artificial network to be sure that they reach their God-given potential. And let me walk you through what that is. If you have a household that is educated and is resourced, that child will be predominantly in a high-quality education setting, probably by 6 months. Makes an extraordinary difference already before that child is entering kindergarten. Their vocabulary set will be that much more advanced than their counterpart. A household who knows that third grade is a critical marker for your success in your career in generating wealth will also know that when they're getting those data sets from the school, that if in fact their child is lagging behind, that I'm going to get a high dose tutor and I'm going to make sure that they're going to excel. That when that child is going into 8th grade and if they need Kumon, whatever it is, or they have a great robust summer camp program, they are doing music and they are doing after school activities and they're participating, they're traveling and seeing history moments come up off the pages. I'm showing you that photo because that's not the life of every child that we represent here in the state of New Jersey. So what happens when it is one singular head household? In a rural sector, perhaps, that where there's only one car and the car has taken off to go to work that day, right? And the child then gets picked up by school, but the school doesn't have before or after programming, or there aren't any municipal programs in place for recreational or for academic support systems. So transportation matters, accessibility to healthcare matters in that household too. If the child is withdrawn, do they have the ability to tap into mental health resources to support that family structure? So other key elements in this play a role. There has to be equitable opportunities for somebody to function who's not resourced in the way of that family that I showed you early on that's not going to allow for their child to fail.
Yeah, it's circumstance, right? It's what you, to the senator's point, it's what you grow up around. And if what you have around you is a network that is going to push you further, then that's where you're going to end up going. And as a civilized society, I don't care about your party affiliation. It's incumbent upon all of us to provide these kids with that network, whatever that may look like, and however you get there. And if you have to spend, this is going to sound crazy from a Republican, but if you've got to spend $5 billion to do it, then spend the $5 billion to do it, because we just heard that it's $13 billion on the back end, right? And that's just and by the way, we talk about this in dollars and cents, right? Which, I got to be honest with you, is ridiculous. It's not dollars and cents, right? Senator Ruiz didn't grow up with, going to school in a Rolls Royce. I didn't, right? I lived in Jamaica, Queens for 3 years of my life. My sister went to PS, don't ask me the number now, it was a long time ago, right? On 148th Street off of Hillside Avenue in Jamaica, Queens. But you get out of there because you want to, but I also had a network of my mother and my father that pushed us to find our way out of it. And for those that don't, then we need to create, as a society, a system around folks to show them that there is more to life than what they are presently living in.
Except that I will argue that, again, because time and instance matters. I think about my parents, right? My dad only went to 4th grade, and my mom got her GED when she was here. So she ended up retiring from New Jersey Bell, which is now Verizon. And the differences in their life, they were able to purchase a home in the early 70s in the North Ward. And from my stories that I remember, one of his first jobs at some cheese factory was 96 cents an hour. Then it was like $1.15. And that doesn't exist now. So I say to myself, right, we can do all these things. There has to be a whole other system reimagination framework that creates sustainability and opportunity outside of the space that we're talking here. When the federal government hasn't raised the federal poverty level since the 60s, and the cost of living has consistently gone up decades after that, you have to start asking yourself why. Right? When this whole conversation, minimum wage, every time it goes up, it's still far short we know the term the Alice families, right? That they're just right there at the cusp. It's still not enough. I think the number in New Jersey is $23 or $26 an hour in order to afford rent. When I think about my daughter, who was in a resource household, who we own the property that we're in, I'm not so sure she's going to be more educated than my husband and I'm not so sure she'll be able to purchase a home, right? So while we're talking about all these things, there are system infrastructures that have to get kind of like restarted from inception. They may have worked at one point in time, but since they never kept up with pace, it intentionally or unintentionally has stifled specific communities for decades because it hasn't grown or changed the way those systems grew and changed for other people who would come to this country to call it home.
And It's a great point to transition slightly on, because we've been discussing the issue in depth so far, but here in New Jersey, we have started to take steps to address some of these issues. Specifically, Senator Ruiz, you championed the Youth Disconnection Prevention Bill, which established a statewide task force to study the root causes of youth disconnection, and for the first time created the position of Youth Disconnection and Prevention Ombudsman within the Department of Education. Senator, what inspired this legislation, and what change do you hope to see as it begins to be implemented?
Well, I would love to say that I came up with the idea with myself, but it was partners in this room that brought it forth, and quite frankly, Opportunity Project here in Newark has always been a quintessential metaphor for what can happen and what will work. And so when the advocates came and knocked on the door, it was a no-brainer for me, because you could see it working. And what they're trying to do is just precisely what we said at the beginning, is amplify that system that's working here and elevate it in a statewide plan.
Yeah, and listen, and what the senator did with this bill, I wish I was there. I would have happily supported it. It happened before me. But one of the things that I learned that was disappointing is that we still haven't filled the ombudsman position. Right? And that's not on the senator. That's not on the members of the legislature. But this is where there's another topic that we had talked about in that prep meeting, was the role of the legislature, right? And it's we come up with these ideas, we pass these laws, we get the governors to sign them, and then they sort of fall into the bureaucracy black hole. And I think it's incumbent upon us, but also through your help, to hold these folks accountable, right? To force us to haul them back before our committees and say, what are you doing? And why isn't it being done? Otherwise, it just, bureaucracy grinds at the pace it does.
And actually, you would have thought that those bills would have been done in 2 weeks. And for whatever reason, it took us some time. I was trying to remember I knew where the hiccup was, but I couldn't remember why. But either way, you would think that the most common sense things would move along, get hired, get ramped up, and not the case.
So speaking of replicating solutions that work and are evidence-based, New Jersey also recently passed the New Jersey Youth Build Act, of which, Senator, you were also a sponsor on. Assemblyman Barless, sorry, I think it might have happened before your time as well.
She gets all the good bills.
Although we're always
I've been
looking
serving for 18 years, man.
So with the recently passed New Jersey Youth Build Act, the state is expanding programs that reconnect young people to education, training, and jobs. How do you see programs like Youth Build, which focus on both education and workforce development, ensuring that young people, perhaps if they don't want to continue on to college, are prepared to move into the workforce? How do you see programs like Youth Build contributing to both personal success and the state's economy?
So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Another thing is partnering with nonprofits that have proven success. So if we're talking about scaling this up, is why not take an infrastructure that already works and see how we can mirror it in the North? The easiest way usually is to bifurcate the state in 3 zones, right? The North, the Central, and then the South, which is something that I think, sometimes we get hyper-focused on that it has to be government, but contractually it could be done with already someone who's proven its ability to show success. And you're gonna see gains. It doesn't matter what school district you're in. You're gonna be in a high-performing suburban district. I guarantee you could probably pick up anywhere from 3 to 7 kids still who don't feel connected to what's happening. But this is outside of zip code. This is really based on individual learning.
Look, the statewide high school graduation rate is 90-something%, right? It's not 100%. I represent, we brought it here, I represent a couple of suburban towns in my district, like Caldwell, for example, right, has a 94% high school graduation rate. Little Falls has a 94%. Hawthorne has 91%. So, I mean, these issues affect all communities. It doesn't matter, right? It's not a Newark, it's not a Camden issue, it's not an Elizabeth, it's not an urban center issue. And so, and 94%, I know the senator would agree, is 6%. That's wrong. Sure. It should always be 100. Doesn't matter where you live, right? But for some reason, those kids don't. And so it's on us to do something about it and to take the lead and show these kids that there is an opportunity for a long and successful, fruitful life on the back end. Some people have the ambition to achieve it on their own. Some people need a little bit of a push, and the senator's right. You don't need government, and this is maybe where she's the Democrat and I'm the Republican. You don't need government to do everything, right? You have a nonprofit network in place. If we have the money, fund that. The reality is, those that are in the nonprofit space, you are far more nimble than the government will ever be. And so why do we need somebody in a cubicle, down in Trenton with, an abacus and a green visor that nobody's ever seen before, making these decisions on an everyday basis?
The only hurdle with that one is, and that's why sometimes I try to keep things within the state government, is that then the budget process is always this fight to get money, to protect, to get money, because it doesn't matter what kind of permanent revenue stream we create. The budget bill supersedes any bill, and then it's like, where's my $5 for this? Where's, so it's.
Oh, you're right, because we
that's,
hear it every.
It's part of the unfortunate larger conversation is funding and making sure that there's that commitment no matter when we're not there.
Right, and I think part of that also means that we as a government should also create other vehicles and avenues to sustain that after us, right? Where it's not dependent upon the legislature. There should be additional tax credits for companies that make investments into nonprofits to help folks, whether they hire them after on the back end or not. And if you do, then there should, to me, and this is not, corporate patronage or anything like that, there should be additional credits and incentives on the back end for hiring people as well out of those programs.
And
right?
we have those
Right,
with
yeah,
the
we do.
apprenticeship programs in the
Yeah.
Department of Labor,
Yeah.
trying to make sure that people who looked, more like we do in our neighborhoods were partnered up with areas of industry where we don't see ourselves. But again, I think it's bifurcated. It's in the Department of Labor. It's not really streamlined with the nonprofit sector or with the Department of Education to say, here are the 20 students, let's get them in this incubator and get them placed. There isn't that stitch, I feel like.
To that point, speaking of public-private partnerships, what role can New Jersey's business community play in this work, and how do we get employers to see young people not as risks, but as untapped assets for our state's economic future?
Look, I think it just comes down to, at the end of the day, everybody operates under the mindset of what's in it for me, right? If you're an employer, you want to hire the best person for that job, right? And so, well, what's in it for me? Is this person the best, most educated, most qualified, best skilled at whatever it may be? So you have, to me, it's you create those incentives for them to hire folks. We talked about it before with Department of Labor. The carpenters are in almost every high school in the state offering apprenticeship programs for kids who, talking to guidance counselors, where children may not be destined for college, so they're trying to pull them into the trades early on, right? Great, that's one avenue, but not everybody wants to be a carpenter. Right? Some people are not good at working with their hands. That's okay. So we have to just sort of figure out what the next step is going to be, and it's going to require collaboration with the private sector and the nonprofit sector. But to the senator's point, it's also, we have to prevent it from being this silo, right? Because every sort of bureaucrat is like, this is my piece. And if you take my piece, then what do I do all day, right? And somebody's going to look at me and say, what are you doing? And we have to sort of force people to say, no, it's not about protecting your job, but it's about doing your job collaboratively with others for the common good.
And I think it's about accountability, right? So we did create a whole framework for apprenticeships outside of the model of construction. It was for science and technology and other areas, and we were giving tax credits to business and industry. New Jersey has a very good way of being compelling. I would suspect that if this were a priority and we're not seeing the numbers of industry participating, that there are ways that we can get individuals more engaged. I just, listen, a selling point for me, this is what boggles my mind still today, why an industry would want to be completely homogenous. Now, I don't know anything about finances. I don't. I do understand humanity, and I say to myself, well, if you had a board and the makeup of an industry that looked like this room here right now, I would suspect that the bottom line is going to be that much greater, right? Because when we're all contributing, then there's going to be something that appeals to you, that appeals to you, that appeals to you, that appeals to you, and you'll end up buying the product because you were all in some form there in the process of generating that marketing plan. It's bizarre that industry would not want to be more inclusive and recognizing that the bottom line, regardless of whatever color, is for them green, right? But I think we do have systems in place. I don't believe that we have the accountability measures set up to the point where to say that this is like hyper-focused. You know, it concerns me. Were you there during COVID? But staffing, yeah. So it was this, you know, every day, 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock press conference, critically needed, right? We were talking about saving individuals. And every member of every cabinet was around the table and they were briefing. And I remember during the midst of this saying, I hope this continues when we're talking about education. Because if you want to talk about livelihood, if we don't talk about education in the framework of the greatest civil rights discussion that we should be having right now in this country, and or as the only pathway that will keep children alive, and you don't recognize that it is a crisis, not unique to my city, not unique to the state, but nationally a crisis. It is infuriating to think that a calendar for an academic structure that is supposed to lift up an individual for 2026, never mind 2025, for 2026, is still based on an agrarian calendar when children are being used as farmhands. Like, so then you have to start to ask yourself why. There has to be a lot of courage in these spaces, because when you flip calendars, I know if there are any teachers in the room, I would love to see a school year-round calendar. Our families need that. My families cannot afford summer camp. Is crazy. And when children are not engaged in a household that English is the second language, where a parent has to go to 2 jobs, that summer learning loss wasn't a COVID episode, which was for some of the other districts. It's a consistently annual thing where the kid can never start. How do you start a race? You can never start. And so, sorry, but it's because these are common sense things, and if we know it, why are we not more courageous about what we need to do, right? Like, we gotta galvanize. And I've done some crazy things down at the State House where even OLS, which is not supposed to give you an opinion, it's Office of Legislative Services, they would look at me and say, I just want to let you know that the person who attempted to do this in Texas was run out of office. And I was like, well, I understand what you're trying to tell me. I was like, I don't care. Because for my kids, it is a matter of survival. And if the rest of New Jersey doesn't recognize that it is a matter of survival, then humanity is going to stay at bay. We're going to consistently have the same issues. Communities are going to be depressed. I mean, these are the truths. They may be uncomfortable, but we have to talk about them if we're really going to engage in a new infrastructure that lifts everybody up.
So speaking of making sure that those decisions are being informed by those with lived experience in it as well, and having that diversity of thought and perspective around the decision-making table, many young people who have experienced disconnection have very clear ideas about what it is that needs to change. And at Newark Opportunity Youth Network, we often like to say that young people are the experts in their lived experience. So how can the state do a better job of bringing the voices of young people into policy making and program design?
You got to get in our face about it. I mean, they have to get in our faces about it, right? I mean, that's the reality. Listen, this is an issue that Senator Ruiz is incredibly passionate about, right? When it comes to this education space, and in particular, because she's seen it in her entire life, having grown up here in the city of Newark, and now she's raising her daughter here as well, right? I live out in Cedar Grove. My issues are different. My constituents' issues are different, right? And so as a representative democracy, we end up catering to those that we represent. But that doesn't mean that we don't have an obligation, not just to the 235,000 people that we represent, but all 9.3 million. But that involves groups like this and, you know, and yours to come to us and say, hey, these are the issues that you guys aren't getting, right? You're not understanding it because you're not seeing it, because you're not living it. And there may be some who it'll go completely over their heads, but I want to believe that the overwhelming majority on both sides of the aisle will stop and listen and be like, okay, we have to do something. Now, we may not agree on how and what that is, but you will force people to stop and think about it. Because a lot of times, if it's not happening in front of you, What do you know?
And speaking both sides of the aisle as well, we're very fortunate that both of the pieces of legislation, both the Youth Disconnection Prevention Bill and the New Jersey Youth Build Act, both passed the Assembly and the Senate unanimously with bipartisan support. So in today's day and age, how do we find consensus among both parties for issues like this that we would position should be nonpartisan and continue to do so?
So and this is not, I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any space. So for me, right, this is because it's a humanity issue. But what I did discover is that in the ed space, when it doesn't, to your point, impact necessarily the community that you're representing, it's almost like I'm not. I will tell you that the pandemic leveraged more power to my agenda, because all of these kind of issues bled into zip codes where they had never, ever, for 10 years I was screaming learning loss, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then the pandemic hit and the phone's ringing. First the phone's ringing, like, when are you going to open up all of the childcare settings? And I was like, well, I thought you thought it was babysitting, right? I mean, like, it was that kind of a flip in a discussion, which is, but that's why history is important, and being in spaces when we're often not is critically important. What I do think is that in this space, I'll argue the human side, I'll argue the generational wealth to the house, I'll argue whatever, but for different colleagues, it will have to be the New Jersey Business and Industry Association who comes in and says. When I took testimony in the first, one of the first hearings that I had for, lifting up early childhood, this was 15 years ago maybe, I had business and industry there, and I believe it was Coca-Cola at the time who came and said, we're having a hard time onboarding individuals. We give a third grade math test where people cannot pass. That was one of the benchmarks. And so I think when you start bringing outliers who are not necessarily aligned with early childhood ed, non-traditional academic programming, and you really flip it from a budget perspective or an economic development perspective, or you bring in public safety. Again, in that early childhood 6-hour committee hearing, we had one of the national public safety sheriff's alliances coming in to say, we support this because it makes our job much better. And so you start getting these allies in different spaces where perhaps someone who wouldn't necessarily, and not Al's, you know what the best thing about having and young people in the spaces is that Al's a dad, and so I think you look at policy entirely. We start looking at policy entirely different, whether his zip code is different than mine and he represents different families. He starts looking at it more from a familiar lens.
I got a 7 and a 5-year-old. I want year-round school too.
Hey, I know. And you pay for summer camp. I know you want year-round school.
Exactly.
But it's bringing in those non-traditional partners that recognize what a youth build program, a highly successful school, an apprenticeship program, an aligned system that makes a New Jersey taxpayer, bringing in those other sectors to kind of fortify the argument, I think is a great way of doing it.
And you mentioned it early on when you said that the highest rate of disconnection was in Cumberland County, right? I mean, most people wouldn't think that. But when you think about what Cumberland County is and what their economics are, it's primarily rural, and it's a lot of farming, right? And so when you go down to the legislators that represent that, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't realize that. But also for whether it's Sussex or Warren or Salem or Hunterdon or Cumberland, these folks that are farmers, I mean, it's generational for them, right? So they work and they know that when they have kids, right, when based on the Gregorian calendar of, when you can farm, I mean, it's sort of still that same mindset of I'm having these kids and one day they're going to help me work the farm because I'm going to get older, right? I have a friend of mine, he met his wife out in college in Ohio, and her parents still own a dairy farm, right? And his father-in-law is waiting for him to retire as a teacher so he can move out there and take it over from him. But it's these types of things where you have to make it relatable to people. Because if it's, to Senator's point, if it's not in your face, you're not going to see it. Or if it wasn't your experience, you certainly aren't going to know it.
So before we transition to questions from the audience, I just had one final question for our panelists. If we come back to this conversation 5 years from now, what would you hope to see? In your minds, what is a fully connected New Jersey, one in which there is opportunity for all young people, look like to you?
Well, having someone in the ombudsperson position, right? Have the report already generated out, a partnership with a proven nonprofit sector that has piloted in other parts of the state, and then individuals who have graduated the program. That's going to be the best selling point, right? So you have a success story, someone who's paying taxes in New Jersey and came through the program. That's what I would want to see. But more importantly for me on the government side is really a symbiotic kind of like system. And I hate to use this word track, so I want everybody to just give me some grace here in this space. It's not track, but it's almost to support, so that we're seeing where our children are in the different spaces, and we're talking to each other to be sure that they don't fail. So I hope that we have a more comprehensive approach in that space, so that we can follow that individual until they become a homeowner and a taxpayer.
So the senator's right. I think she's far more glass half full than I am. I think what I would love to see is the ombudsman in place and a plan of what this is going to look like, how we're actually going to execute it, right? And then, but a plan that's not just a 18-month plan, but a plan that's an 18-month, 36, 5 years, 7 years, right? To the senator's point, so that whether you want to call it track, catalog, whatever, but you can sort of follow the progression of these young folks and truly get to success stories.
Thank you both. I think we have about 10 minutes for questions from the audience.
Hard questions go to her.
All right, we'll start over there.
We've seen individuals with special needs have long-term, chronically low adult employment rates. So when you're thinking about this plan and current issues with funding surrounding special needs populations, where do neurodiverse individuals fit into this plan for your long-term planning?
Listen, that's a real problem, and that's unfortunately a population that always gets lost in the sauce, right? No matter what your issue you're talking about, whether it's housing or it's jobs or it's education, that segment of the population always gets lost, and we need to certainly do more to address that and provide those folks, those individuals, with resources. But I think also a lot of times we try to do too much at the same time. And I think those things need to be dual tracked, because if we try to solve for that while trying to solve for this, I worry that we get nothing accomplished, right? I'm not saying that those with disabilities that need special assistance should not have structures in place for them to live fruitful lives as well. And there's certainly employers out there that offer jobs. There's this company, Community Options, which is a nonprofit that also then I think they own like flower shops and things like that as well, where they employ their residents to do work. And so we have to address that issue as well. There's no doubt about it. But that is to me, a much bigger and much more complex issue because of the needs that folks may have.
So I slightly disagree. I think it's making sure that when we set up these big boards, and we often forget to put an advocate on to make sure that someone is at the table looking at it through this lens. And New Jersey has our sheltered workshop program. It's just something that gets cut or has to get fought for budgeting, which works to educate and then put workforces. But it doesn't make sense that sheltered workshops wouldn't be aligned with whatever this other group is, because it's about getting people to work. So I think there's a space and a combination for it. The biggest thing that I would agree with you is that housing. Yeah. It is heartbreaking at every budget hearing where you have parents coming in, and up to 21, there are services. But for aging out, it is an extraordinarily difficult conversation to have, because New Jersey has been failing that.
18 to 21 segment, that 3 year.
We do not have enough spots. It's just terrible.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Shade McDaniel. I'm a senior vice president at the All Stars Project, which has been around for 40 years, but in Newark for 25. And we're known for connecting marginalized youth to the mainstream. We're most known for our job readiness work. I love that there's an emphasis on education, and I see a lot of our colleagues in the room who are in the after-school space, and we focus on development, which is a great partner to education. more so now, more than ever, and we've placed thousands of young people, high schoolers, in internships, which we know is probably one of the best ways to support, especially under-resourced young people, to get them out of poverty and actually have a generational change in their trajectory. And with this current climate, we're noticing that it's been harder and harder to get corporate buy-in, and having those corporations accept our young people into their workforce, to have them do more exploration and experiential learning, which we know is very much connected to their success in life. So I love what we were talking about earlier. You guys were talking about cross-sector efforts and a lot of important things that are going on to connect nonprofit. And I agree, nonprofit's where it's gonna happen at. We are the people who's gonna make it happen. Can you just share a little bit, like, outside of the tax breaks you might be giving companies, like, what is it gonna take to motivate the corporations, the government, and the nonprofit sector to come together, change the paradigm in the way we think about economy and our bottom line, and noticing that this is what it's gonna take for us to move our young people from all aspects of life forward at this, like, grassroots level? Does that make sense what I'm asking you?
Yeah, because I think it falls on leadership and accountability. So I could tell you, right, you guys got decimated, these budget cycles, right? And that's what's happening to the nonprofit sectors that are creating these wraparound services. And perhaps business is fearful because if you're using words like diversity and inclusion, then, sorry, I just can't sometimes. And it's creating these things, but it really has to come down to leadership and accountability, because we have these systems in place. It's just no one is, and as much as I try, I can't, it's got to come from the governor's office. It's got to be in a space where these are going to be, it's going to be this blueprint for the state that is going to include everybody, right, with this 10-year, 30-year forecasted plan, so that we know what we're doing. And it's not this, we got cut, I need money, otherwise I can't do my after-school programming. Can we get a buds person in this office to do this? We don't have school facilities money, and so we can't do chem at this building because it was built before Abraham Lincoln took office. True story, y'all, for those who are not in Newark. I have a building that was built before Abraham Lincoln took office. I mean, it's those things, right? So I think it's really a measure of who is going to lead this state, what their focus is going to be, and a lot of it falls on accountability.
And it's, Senator's right, it's accountability, but it's also, you get everybody in a room, and the question is, okay, how long is this idea gonna last? Is this a today thing? Is this you all have been called into these types of meetings, right, with government agencies that say we wanna do X, Y, and Z. Okay, you walk out of it, all right, next one comes in, we'll move on to something else. So is there an actual commitment to sustaining whatever this initiative is? Because you can get every CEO in the state to come into a room, do a meeting with the governor, and say, this is what I want, because the governor smacks his hand on the table 10 times. Okay, all right, you walk out, all right, we'll see what he does 2 years from now, because it'll be somebody else, or the priorities will have changed. So that's why I was saying it's not just the governor or the cabinet officers, it's what are you doing systemically in that layer underneath that is actually going to implement these things to send the signal that this idea or this program is actually here to stay.
We have time for one more. Two more? Okay.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Monique Baptiste from Strive. So I guess my question is, it goes back, Senator, to your comment about the world when COVID hit, right? I mean, the thing that was unique about that was the urgency. Everyone had urgency. Everyone understood.
And empathy.
And empathy. And this was life and death, right? To your point. And I think one of the things that I think a lot of us who are in the nonprofit sector, who are proximate, is that we grapple with on a daily basis is, like, we have a strong meeting culture here in New Jersey. Meeting culture here in New Jersey.
Meeting culture. Oh,
yeah.
And not doing. You're saying
love to meet,
you're
right?
saying a not doing culture.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Like
You're being kind.
Like, meeting is a sign of productivity here in the state of New Jersey, and so I'm wondering, how do we turn that corner, right? How do we get that urgency back? Because the reality is, when we're talking about young people, I mean, the clock is ticking, right? Like they are being, between AI and a lack of skills alignment, the longer we take, the harder it is. An economy as hot as it is in the Jersey, New York metro, the longer we take, the harder it is for them to meet these moments. And so I guess my question to you, which is probably completely unfair, is how do we get this urgency infused into this action, or into this moment, so that we can actually start getting some action?
Is that another meeting?
So I remember talking to the senator about this years ago. She probably forgot. But I have always said that I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I am so lucky that they're 5 and 7. Because all this learning loss that happened during the pandemic, they didn't know what it meant. Right? My son wasn't even born then, but our daughter was 18 months, 2 years old. So as far as she was concerned, she got to stay home all day. But yes, you're right, is long-term, what are we doing? And that's a good point. I've never heard that. We have I like that meeting mentality, but there's never any follow-through. You're right. And I think it touches on what we said before, is it's you folks holding everybody's feet to the fire. It's you folks holding us accountable that, hey, you told us you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And then it's imperative upon us as legislators, and all of you to a certain extent, I don't want to put everything on you, to then go to the front office, whomever may be in the governor's office, however many years from now, and say, hey, this is important to everybody. And you made a commitment, and we need you to continue to maintain on that commitment.
Yeah, and this is not to throw it to anybody else, but it really has to also fall, like, I pretend that I can tell all the departments to do what they got to do, but at the end of the day, they do not, right? I'm not in charge. So it's really comes out of that gubernatorial office. But what we can do collectively is to say, where's this? Where's this? We need this. We need this. Where's this? Where's this? We need this. We need this. And that has to be backed by power, unfortunately. But let's keep it 100 here, right? Sometimes colleagues don't function unless they view something as an ominous, potential shift in, oh, if I don't do this, then this group is going to be angry at me. It's part of the better than like it's part of the political discourse in the public sector area that we do have to leverage. But I do think that it has to come from, and maybe we create this like superpower group with 5 or 6 of us, where there's one, individuals who are on the ground doing it, 2 bipartisan legislators, and then some key CEO billionaire that people would be shocked that they're walking in a room with us, right? That's when you begin to see those shifts.
That's actually a perfect segue to my question. I'm Teresa
You are
Wilkie.
that CEO?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I wish, yeah.
She's the billionaire.
I'm Teresa Wilkie. I'm currently embedded in the Governor's Office for Children in Maryland. So I do have questions about sort of the interagency
Oh, and I
coordination.
so am jealous because you have a division. Do you have a division of early childhood, correct?
I believe so,
Or
yes.
a department. And I'm trying
Yes.
to get a department.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
But we're going to beat you, don't worry.
Yes, I would love to talk with you. And so I have questions about sort of the durability of after administrations. How do we get? So we have a children's cabinet, and so the leaders of the agencies are meeting. But we've really kind of dug into the bureaucrats and the career staff that are throughout these agencies and finding where are the chain of accountability snags and all these things. I'm just curious if you guys have had any conversations around wider engagement. Just what you just said sounds like an incredible
No, because when
opportunity.
I brought up the Department of Early Childhood, you had to see the scathing looks I got from all the members in the different bifurcated departments.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm not trying to eliminate your job. We just want you in one area so that if you're putting in an application for an infant and toddler space and you're having an issue with because it's the childhood process here, y'all, is wild, both for a parent and for someone who's opening up a space, that if it's a DP related matter, that I can go to my counterpart and say, where are we, as opposed to then hanging up the phone, calling up a different building and calling whatever. So changes, you work in government, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it has to do with accountability, because I'll be honest, right? So I'm a deputy chief of staff to Essex County. I've worked in government my entire life. Anyone who is from this area knows that Essex County doesn't play. You give us a check, we put a check on the ground, a shovel in the ground on Friday, and the following 2 Fridays, the school's open and the kids are learning inside of the classroom. It has to do with accountability and leadership. When I get on the turnpike, that gets lost severely. And it is frustrating because I'm a government employee. I know it can work. But I think to the assemblyman's point is that the top tier shifts where all the ideas are and the bandwidth is, but the people who support the departments are entrenched for it's tough, but it's not an excuse.
It's not an excuse, and that's where we all have to sort of focus our attention, right? Is on those people, because they're the ones that when you want to make change or you want to make reform, they're like, I'll just outlive you. You'll be gone. And then I'll go back to doing whatever it is I want to do or what we were doing that we're comfortable with. And to the senator's point, she's going to roll her eyes in 1 second.
Oh, waiting.
I know you're waiting. That's why I'm going to drag it out a little bit longer. No, to me, this was, everybody calm down for a second. This is what Doge was supposed to be, right? This efficiency I told you, hear me out. What we're talking about.
Could you just not have said
No,
that
I said
we need
supposed
to be
to
more
be.
efficient in
Supposed
government?
to be. But my point is, in theory, that's what it's supposed to be, right? All
In
departments
theory, I don't know
talking
what
to
it's
each
supposed
other.
to be, but I support effectiveness and efficiency.
Yes, there you go. That's my
Okay.
point, right? Like in theory, what she and I have been saying for the last hour, and what everybody has been saying is that these departments are all siloed, and they're not talking to each other. And this is the problem that all of you have every day with government, right? Is you go to one area and you talk to one agency, you get one answer. Then they say, okay, now you got to call DEP about this other thing, or DOT or Department of Ed because you need transportation services. You go over there, and it's a totally different answer that, by the way, undoes everything you just did in the other department. And so there's that lack of synergy and synchronicity between these agencies is, to me, what impedes our ability to actually implement long-term plans.
Well, I think that is all the time that we have for today, but please
I don't want to
join me-
end on that note.
You don't want to end on
Welcome to
government?
the city of Newark
Senator,
again,
would you
where
like
we
to
are going to bipartisan build this relationship on streamlining government
Yes.
effectively on behalf of humanity without
That is
using any
correct.
terminology that a federal government has used before.
Yes, I was going to ask if the thank you. Just before we left, if you had any closing remarks to leave with the group.
Just thank you to everybody who's here. So we go down there and we write framework and we write policy, but you're the warriors who are really doing the work. And so a debt of gratitude, because no one, as we suggested, right, can do it. Not the faith-based organizations, not the nonprofit, not the local levels of government, not state alone. But there's got to be a better way. Right? There has to be. I believe that there has to be. But it requires a lot of courage. And so I would say to all of you in the room, whether you're here or not, when government is attempting to change something, and a lot of times it is, for the better, we do need those support systems in these rooms too to back those systemic changes that really sometimes come back with visceral kind of reactions from entrenched sectors of work groups sometimes, just because it's fearful. And I get that, right? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to me? And so it's really, I think, making sure that we're all talking from the same kind of space, that we're advocating. And so there's a level of trust when we're trying to change systems to create a better, a streamlined process. But really just thank you to all of you for doing the work on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is that as much as the senator and I and everybody here likes to tell their kids that they know everything, we actually don't. And we need you to tell us what we don't know.
Speak for yourself, Al.
Well, I tell my kids I know everything.
I can't park.
Huh? You
I'm
can't,
a terrible parker.
just in general or parallel?
Parallel. And in general, I feel like, too. Sorry.
It's not surprising.
But-
I've seen her
but to
drive.
Al's
I've
point-
seen her drive. Stop it. But yes, and to piggyback off what the senator was saying, like, this is where we need you. I know you all have a lot on your plates every day, but these forums like this and the ideas that you come up with help guide what we deliver in terms of public policy. And so don't ever think, I can only speak for myself, and I believe I can speak for the senator on this part, don't ever think you can't come to us.
Yeah, that's true.
and tell us we could be doing something better. We will absolutely listen.
And that is good. We're both that way. It is
Yeah.
true. People say when I don't know something, I think some of you have been
You've
in
never
spaces.
told
Someone
me.
will ask me a question. I'll be like, I don't know.
I've
Like,
never
I'm
heard
not
you say
gonna-
that. I've never heard you say I don't know.
Because you and I talk about things that where I'm an expert
Oh,
in,
yes,
and so
that's right.
therefore I don't have to use those lines. But it's really understand that it's impossible for us to know
Right.
everything, and so we need to rely on the successes of a framework that can then build
Absolutely.
that, and that doesn't go unnoticed. It may not happen right away. I'm super busy, but it happens.
Well, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.